everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. Thank you so much for making Ref. If you jump on here live, make sure to give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. Share the video on all social media platforms. Make sure you click that bell so you'll be notified whenever we go live, and tell your friends, tell your family about the channel. Good evening, Kevron. Glad to have you here as always. But it's time for another 2026 college football early season preview. I feel like I haven't done one in a couple of weeks. It's been so long that I really can't remember how many I've done so far. I know for sure I've done LSU, Florida, Miami, Ohio State, North Carolina, USC, and Florida. Those are the ones that I recall doing, but it's gone for good. I don't save it, nothing like that. So those are the ones that I recall doing, but I know I've done more than that. But typically by the time the season starts, I do right around 20. But it's getting harder and harder to do these because now with the roster turnover so much because of the transfer portal, NIL stuff, you know, you look at a team's roster in February and think, okay, I got a pretty good read on this team. And then by the time April or May comes around, they've done lost half the guys that you thought were going to be there. And then because you can, you know, basically announce in the middle of the season you're transferring, the roster you see in game 1 may not be the roster you see in game 6. So it's always been hard to do these things, but it's getting harder and harder. But it's just for fun, no money on the line. So I still do them. But the team I picked this time, I picked because, believe it or not, they were talking about them earlier today. I was listening to some national sports talk radio. Hey there, Shasha. Glad to have you here. And hey there, I'm going to call you Puppies. Glad to have you here. And Shasha and Puppies, if y'all are new to the channel, thank you so much for being here. Feel free to give the video a like and a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hey there, Abram. Glad to have you here. And they were Kansas State. And apparently the Kansas State win total 8.5. And when I heard that earlier today, I was like, let me go check out Kansas State's schedule because I haven't done that yet. And let me see if I think they can win more than 8.5 games. And then I thought, you know what, I'll just make this tonight's video because we know they were coached by Chris Kleiman. He basically, after last season, said, hey, because of this transfer portal NIL stuff, you basically have to coach now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because now if a player calls you, you have to answer because you're not supposed to call them, which we know coaches do. But according to the rule books, you're not supposed to. He's like, hey, I don't get any family time because even if we go on vacation, if somebody wants to have a video press conference, they call me, I've got to take time away from my family, to talk to them. So you're basically coaching all day, every day, because if you make a player on your team unhappy, he can just come right back and say, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow, and nothing you can do about it. So he pretty much said, but because of the transfer portal NIL stuff, that coaching just wasn't fun anymore. So he retired, and Colin Klein, who used to be a quarterback at Kansas State when Bill Snyder was there the second time around, is now the new head coach. He used to be an offensive coordinator. I think he was most recently at Texas A&M, I believe. But Sean Gleason is now the offensive coordinator, and Jordan Peterson is now the defensive coordinator, and Avery Johnson is still there. And if Avery Johnson could live up to expectations, I think Kansas State would be set, because I recall when Avery Johnson stepped on campus, they had so much high hopes for him that they basically told at the time their quarterback Will Howard, hey, you can kick rocks. We don't care where you go, what you do, but we don't want you. This incoming freshman is so much better than you are. And that's why Will Howard ended up going to Ohio State and then won a national championship, because Kansas State made it clear, hey, we think Avery's better than you are. Hey there, user, glad to have you here. And hey there, Jeep guy, glad to have you here on this Thursday evening. And Jeep guy, if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for being here. Feel free to give the video a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. And make sure to click that bell so you'll be notified whenever we go live. So Will Howard leaves to go to Ohio State, and Avery Johnson's freshman year, he looked like he was going to be, the guy that Kansas State thought he was. And for whatever reason, he's gotten worse every year. Thank you, Steve. I greatly appreciate that. If you are new, tonight I'm talking college football, but I also talk NFL. I talk NASCAR, talk wrestling, talk baseball, talk basketball, and then I do top 10 countdowns that may not be about sports or wrestling whatsoever. So it's a variety here on the channel, so thank you so much for stopping by, Steve. I greatly appreciate that. So hopefully Colin Klein, since he used to be a quarterback, can get Avery Johnson, maybe not as good as he was freshman year, but at least close, because his freshman year by far has been his best season. And I talked about Kansas State going into last year, and their coaching staff last year made it clear that they did not want Avery Johnson to run. They basically told him, hey, don't run, stay in the pocket, and become a passing quarterback. And it made zero sense to me, because Avery Johnson's best tool is running. His running ability is what makes him a better passer. So why the Kansas State people last year, the coaching staff, didn't want the guy whose best asset to not run, I'll never understand. But now that Colin Klein is the head coach, and he used to be a quarterback in a Bill Snyder offense, it was all about the quarterback run game, maybe we'll see Avery Johnson, go back to that. Well, let's go ahead and talk about their schedule now. They have 7 home games and 5 road games, and their off week is week 5, the first week in October. They open the season with all 3 of their non-conference games, and then they'll play 9 straight conference games, and all 3 of their non-conference games are home games. They don't go on the road in non-conference play, and they don't have no neutral site games in non-conference play. All 3 of their non-conference games are at home. They open up on September the 5th against Nicholls State. Never have figured out why we don't have a penny state or a dime state or a quarter state, but we do have a Nicholls State. And then they'll play the Cougars of Washington State on September 12th, and then wrap up their non-conference portion of the schedule on September 19th against Tulane. And then they'll start conference play the following week, September 26th, on the road against Cincinnati. And then, as I said, they'll have their bye week on the first Saturday in October. Then they come back on October the 10th, back at home, playing the Houston Cougars. And then the following Saturday, October 17th, they play their arch rival, Kansas. Now, I don't know why that game is not the last game of the year. That is their arch rival. Those 2 teams hate each other, but it's played in the middle of October. October 24th, they go back on the road to play Arizona State. And then they wrap up the month of October on Halloween on the road again against the Colorado Buffaloes. Then they open up November on the 7th, back at home against Oklahoma State. And then they'll play TCU on November 14th at TCU. And then The final home game of the season for Kansas State comes on Saturday, November 21st against Arizona. And then they'll wrap up the season Thanksgiving weekend on Saturday, November 28th against Iowa State. So they don't play Utah, they don't play Texas Tech, and they don't play BYU. And since those are probably the three best teams in the Big 12, that's probably why Kansas State's picked to win 8.5 games, because you avoid the three best teams in the conference. But it's still hard for me to say they're going to go above 8.5, only because we still haven't seen until the season starts how good Avery Johnson's going to look with Sean Gleason as the OC and Colin Klein as the head coach. If Avery Johnson can get back to close to what he was his freshman year, I could see them winning 9 or 10 games with no Utah and no Texas Tech and no BYU. But if Avery Johnson's what he was last year, they're going to be lucky to win 6 games again, even though they're not playing Texas Tech or Utah or BYU. But I think they win all 3 non-conference games: Nicholls State, Washington State, and Tulane. Tulane's been really good the last few years, but I think they take a step back this year. Not a huge step back, but I don't think they're going to be the top 20 team they've been the last couple of years. And then I think they beat Cincinnati in the first conference game for them on September 26th. But then I think after their bye week, the first Saturday in October, they come back on the 10th. I think they lose that home game to Houston. I think Houston's got a phenomenal quarterback and one of the most rated coaches in America. Houston's really good. I think Houston beats them. And then I think they lose at Arizona State, only because of the fact Arizona State's head coach is also very underrated. And I think no longer having is going to help Arizona State. He was a cancer to their clubhouse for whatever reason. So I think him being gone is going to help them, but I think they do lose at Arizona State. They'll beat Colorado. They'll beat Oklahoma State. And then I've got them with back-to-back losses, November 14th on the road at TCU, and then back at home on the 21st of November against Arizona. I think Arizona's quarterback, Noah Fafita, is going to have an incredible season. He won't win the Heisman, but he'll have a few Heisman plays throughout the season. And if Arizona could be a top 10 team, he'd have a chance to win the Heisman. He's really good. And they've actually gotten a little bit better every year under this coach. So I think Arizona has a shot to have a really good season. And I think Kansas State comes back on the 28th of November and wraps up the regular season and beats Iowa State, because I think Iowa State's going to be terrible. But this schedule for me, with 5-4 in the Big 12, 8-4 overall, with losses to Houston, Arizona State, TCU, and Arizona, is strictly because until I see Avery Johnson improve, I've got to go with what I've seen the last 2 years, which has been a hot pile of stinking garbage. And if he can improve, I still think Houston's better than they are, and I still think Arizona's better than they are, but I could see them beating Arizona State and TCU. So I could see them going 10-2, but I still think Houston's better, and I still think Arizona's better. But if Avery Johnson can show me in the first 4 or 5 games that he's going back to the freshman year Avery Johnson, then I'll say, okay, I was wrong. They're going to go 10-2. We're really not going to know at first, because if he struggles with Nicholls State, there's no hope for him. It's going to be a long season. But he should at least look good against Nicholls State and Washington State and Tulane. The first real test will be on the 26th of September at Cincinnati. That'll probably be the first time we really get to look back and see, okay, has he improved or has he not? So I've got them going 5-4 in the Big 12, 8-4 overall with losses to Houston, Arizona State, TCU, and Arizona. So if the over/under is 8.5, I've got them going under. Maybe I'll be wrong, but 8-4 is better than what they were last year, but it's still not great. But if you look at the history of Kansas State, that's typically most of the time what they are. They're a 7 to 8 win football team. You know, they'll sneak up on occasion and have a 10 or 11 win season, but then they come right back the next season and they win 5 or 6. But on the average, they're typically a 7 or 8 win football team. The difference, you know, now is with Colin Klein being the coach and Colin Klein having played there, you know, he might be able to quickly adapt to being the head coach. He knows the area, obviously, and knows all the parents, because all these kids coming up now, he probably went to school with their parents and somehow knows their parents. So I don't think you'll have a problem recruiting as long as Kansas State can pay the kids, because that's what matters this day and time. But when Bill Snyder was the coach, there was no NIL. There was no paying players. You know, you had to get what you get. And Bill Snyder would only win 7 or 8 games most years, but he was just like I was Coach Kirk Ferentz. Bill Snyder, for the most part, had 2 and 3 star kids. So if you only have 2 and 3 star kids and you have a 7 or 8 win season, you're doing pretty doggone good. That's about what you expect when you have 2 and 3 star kids. So we'll see what Colin Klein is able to do. But I've got them 5-4 in the Big 12, 8-4 overall. Any thoughts on any of this? Please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. I was told that you could view a solar eclipse through a colander. I tried it and ended up straining my eyes. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends.